Okay, hello, Quora Noobs and Noobettes. My name is Wade Smith, and I've been debating with several of you very incompetent people about the nature of UFC fighting and why wrist locks are not used in the UFC. It's not because wrist locks are not effective, it's because they don't know how to use wrist locks correctly. First of all, one of my mentors is Grandmaster Michael Calandra, that I've been studying his videos for the past, 10 years or so as refresher courses off and on. And he is a retired police officer and a 10th degree black belt. And he used to use wrist locks every day on the job to apprehend criminals. All right. So if it doesn't work, why does it work in the real world in a life or death fight with a criminal who's armed with a knife or a gun that a police officer can disarm him with a wrist lock? All right. If you claim it doesn't work in the octagon, why does it work for police against criminals? All right. Secondly, wrist locks actually will tap out about 85 to 95% of all people like that, just the wrist lock itself, when you crank on it full power. All right. But even if it does not tap them out directly, it disables their entire arm and buckles their knees, and you can crank and kick, crank and kick, crank and kick on them over and over again. It becomes a submission combo, which they never even use that term in MMA because they don't know what that term means, the term submission combo. It becomes a submission combo to either transition to a much stronger submission or to land your strikes at will, especially your kicks to the abdomen. When you crank down on them, either you have them in the front wrist lock like so, or you have them in the full wrist lock like so, and you crank down and torque inward, down and inward, down and inward, and then you kick and knee strike them to the abdomen over and over every time you crank down. I guarantee you 3, 4, 5 kicks is all you'll need, and anybody will either be doubling over in pain and give up, or the referee will stop the fight due to unanswered strikes. All right, if you're in the UFC. I guarantee you the referee will have to stop the fight due to unanswered strikes because your opponent will be totally disabled and get maimed if the fight goes on much longer. The first 8 submissions I learned as a yellow belt when I was 12 or 13 years old in Ishinryu Karate, the first time I took Ishinryu Karate, were the front wrist lock, the full wrist lock, the reverse wrist lock, and the double cross arm wrist lock, I think. Rear naked choke, that's 5. Disarmor, 6. Full arm bar and reverse arm bar. That's the first 8 submissions I learned on my first submissions class. And you weren't considered sufficiently trained into it, and even if you were 12 or 13 years old, until you could tap out an adult black belt with it. And I got to where I could tap adult black belts by the time I was 13 and a half years old, light green belt. I was able to tap out the adult black belts and beat them in a fight. Now, the second time I took karate, same style but a different instructor, Mark Myers was the second instructor. I was under him for about 4.5, 5 years, whatever you think. At least 4.5 years and maybe 5 years. I'm not exactly sure. I got to think. But anyway, I studied under him until late 2000, I think. He got all the way to 3rd degree brown belt, which is first Q or black belt candidate, and went through about 6 months worth of black belt testing. A real black belt test, by the way, is not them lining up 100 candidates and testing them across 30 minutes or an hour. A real black belt test takes 6 months to administer for one person. A real black belt test, by the way. You don't get a real black belt by a 30-minute test and spin kicking a target out of somebody's hand. That doesn't make you a black belt. Quora Noob thinks joint locks don't work. They've never failed to work for me. My personal experience is they've never failed to work.